In the first reading today, St. Paul speaks about their conduct among the Thessalonians, as well as what it is that they themselves have called the Thessalonians to do. So he says that we exhorted you and encouraged you, insisting that you walk in a manner worthy of the God who calls you to his kingdom and glory. That's after she's speaking about the fact that when they were with them, they were devout, they were just, and they were blameless in the way that they treated the people. Then we look at the gospel, and we hear Jesus saying, "Scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites." Tells them that they're like whitewashed tombs. They look real nice on the outside, but on the inside, they're full of dead men's bones. That's what we have to be so careful of. It is a necessity, first of all, that we call people to live truly holy lives. But we have to be doing it ourselves, because people will watch what you're doing. If they know you go to Mass, they know you're trying to live a good life, they're going to be looking at you. And as it happens, if they really don't want to be living that life, they are going to find any little thing that they can find. In fact, sometimes, especially if it's your family, they will push you and push you and push you until you break. And then you get angry and you blow up and you scream and yell and holler at them, and then they say, "See, why should I go to Mass? Why should I live a good Christian life? Look at you. You're doing the same thing that I'm doing. See, so why should I change?" So they will use anything against you that they possibly can. Now that's one thing, to be able to say, all right, in my weakness I fell. It's another to be able to say, I'm a hypocrite. We all are, I recognize that to whatever degree. But when Jesus is talking about the scribes and Pharisees, externally, they looked really good. They went through the motions. If we put into a modern day Catholic perspective, they went to daily Mass, they said their prayers, they were fasting, they were doing all kinds of good stuff. And then they were really nasty people. They were judgmental, they were condemning, they were uncharitable. If somebody wasn't the way that they were, they treated them badly. I remember when I was over in Israel, we went to dinner one night. We're sitting in a restaurant, and all of a sudden there was all kinds of screaming and rocks coming through the window. They busted the window out. These were some people coming back from the temple. What we didn't know is that the restaurant was owned by somebody who was Jewish, and it was now Friday night, which begins the Sabbath. And these people coming back from the Wailing Wall were very upset that this Jewish person had his restaurant open when it was the Sabbath. They were correct. He shouldn't have had his restaurant open on the Sabbath. Throwing rocks through his window and throwing rocks at the patrons who were there wasn't exactly the best way of trying to get their point across. So they were just over there praying, and they were so devout and they were so holy, so that they could make a big scuffle, break somebody's window, and take the risk of hurting people. Not exactly the kind of example that should have been given. Now again, we can look at that and say, oh, those people. Yeah, let's look back at ourselves and say, oh, this person. How often do we do things that are similar? Not breaking windows and so on, but judging others. This is where people who are trying to live a spiritual life, this is where the devil trips us up. We wouldn't ever actually come straight out and say, well, I'm better than you are. We just act it. We look down upon them, we condemn them, we speak about them, and what's really tragic about it is that one day we were probably just like that, or way worse. And yet, here we are saying, oh, that person. Really? How about looking in the mirror and say, oh, this person? As St. Augustine said, if it weren't for the grace of God, that would be me. It is only by God's grace that we have been able to get away from that kind of lifestyle. It's only by God's grace that we have a prayer life, that we're coming to Mass, that we're trying to live a good and holy life. God, however, allows us to fall into these things to see how much we still have to grow. Because we'd like to convince ourselves of how holy we are until we just look at our thoughts and listen to the words that come out of our mouths, and suddenly we realize we're not really as holy as we'd like to look. We're just like the whitewashed tombs. We look nice on the outside, we're still filled with rot on the inside. That's what needs to be removed. And so that's the thing that we need to be careful of. So for those who are parents, those who are teachers, those who just trying to live your daily life, being an example, we need to call people, as St. Paul did when he was with the Thessalonians, to walk in a way that is worthy of God, to live lives that are truly holy. But we also need to do it ourselves. As the old saying goes, actions speak louder than words. And Jesus himself told us that from those to whom more has been entrusted, more is going to be expected. If God has given you the grace to be able to recognize the importance of Mass, the importance of prayer, the importance of holiness, then he's going to expect way more out of you than he's going to expect from that person that you or I might be judging or condemning in our thoughts or our words. And so we have to look at that and say, okay, how should I do this? Yes, what this person is doing is wrong. That's not the question. Is this person living a bad life, or is this action something that's sinful? Yeah, it is. So how do we handle that? We treat the person with charity, first of all. We pray for them. And if you know the person well enough to be able to speak to them and encourage them and so on, do so. But not condemning, not angry. Ask yourself, how many times has that helped you? If somebody were to call you names, are you going to go, yeah, I guess you're right? It's like, no, that's not usually how we respond. If somebody's angry and nasty and attacking, we don't usually take a real humble attitude and go, oh, yeah, I need to change. No, instead we fight back. And then we try to justify ourselves and we treat others that way. We can't do that. So we need to be that example first. And then we need to make sure that our words and our actions are in correlation. Otherwise, people are going to look at us and say, what a bunch of hypocrites. You act this way and then you say this, or you treat people like that, or whatever it might be. So first of all, remember, for most of us anyway, that's where we came from. Maybe we weren't doing what that person is doing, but we might have been doing way worse. But regardless, most of us have come out of a situation that maybe wasn't all that impressive. So how can we stand in condemnation of anybody else who's not living a very impressive life? Secondly, it's only by God's grace that we got out of that kind of a life. And so it's only by God's grace that those people are going to get out of it. So condemning them isn't going to help anything. We need to pray, we need to speak, we need to encourage, we need to do everything with charity. That's hard. It's easier to condemn. It's easier to judge. The negative stuff comes naturally to us. I don't quite understand why. It's just human nature. If you talk about good things, people don't want to listen. If you talk about bad things, they'll be right there. My mom used to tell us all the time, to try and teach a kid takes about 1,000 times of telling them please and thank you. Tell them shut up once, they've got it. It's like, why the negative do we pick up on, but the good stuff we don't? Well, we all know from our own life that that's still the way it works. We want to do what's right, but then we are tempted the other way and we fall into this and whatever. So let's look at our own weakness first. Strive to be like St. Paul, to live devoutly, justly, and blamelessly. Then we have the grace to be able to call others, not to condemn them, because we're going to do that to ourselves first. And so if we recognize our own weakness, then it's going to help us to be compassionate toward others in their weakness. We recognize our own brokenness. We're not going to stomp on somebody else's brokenness. It said of Jesus, the prophet Isaiah, that he doesn't put out the smoldering wick. He doesn't break the bruised reed. And so we can't be doing that either. So it's a great opportunity for each one of us to look at that within ourselves, because the temptation, especially for those who are on the right track and trying to live a good life, is to fall into being judgmental, to fall into being condemning, to fall into being negative. We have every reason in the world to be positive. We have Jesus right there. And yet, how negative and nasty we can be. Why? Because we're looking the wrong way. Keep the focus on Jesus. The focus is on him. We're going to live our lives the way we should. We're going to be the example that we should be. The words coming out of our mouths are the ones that are going to reflect how we're living. And we're going to be able then to exhort and encourage others to live devoutly, justly, and blamelessly, because they're going to see it in us and they're going to hear it from us. That's the kind of example, that's the kind of teacher that each one of us needs to be.